Hey everyone, Noir here. Let's get into today's Reddit story.
My brother stepped into my new house, looked around, and said, "You think you're better than us now?" I met his eyes and answered, "No. I just finally proved you wrong after you spent years saying I'd never accomplish anything." The expression on his face changed instantly, and I knew this wasn't going to end the way he expected. I was 27 when I bought my first house. Not rented, bought. It was completely mine. No roommates, no parents co-signing the loan, no inheritance, no shortcuts. I earned every bit of it by working hard, saving money, and taking jobs that most of my relatives looked down on. I know owning a home at that age sounds early, but I'd been working since I was 16. I picked up freelance coding jobs online, delivered food in every kind of weather, and lived as cheaply as possible through college while most of my friends were out having fun. I wasn't chasing attention. I just wanted security. I wanted a place where I didn't have to answer to anyone or ask permission to make it feel like home. When I finally signed the paperwork and held the key in my hand, I didn't think about celebrating or posting it online. The first people I wanted to tell were my family. Maybe that was naive. Maybe I still believed they'd finally be proud of me. In my family, success always seemed to come with resentment. My older brother, Brandon, was the golden child. He was the popular athlete who somehow managed to make everything about himself. My younger sister, Natalie, was still treated like the baby, even though she hadn't done much since high school. I was the quiet middle kid, the one who got good grades, helped around the house, and stayed out of trouble. Somehow that only made me invisible, or like I was trying too hard. My parents weren't cruel, but they had a strange habit of calling me selfish whenever I made decisions on my own, then ignoring me whenever I tried to include them. I spent years keeping my head down, working, saving, and hoping that one day they'd finally see me as someone worth being proud of. Moving into my house felt unreal. The paint was still fresh, the wood floors smelled new, and I spent the whole weekend getting everything set up. I didn't own much furniture yet, but every single thing inside had been bought with my own money. There was even a small fireplace, something I dreamed about ever since I was a kid. I took a few simple pictures, the front porch, the empty living room, and the coffee table I'd built myself. Then I sent them to our family group chat. "Hey everyone, I just moved into my first house. I'd love for you to come by this weekend. I'll cook. Let me know what works." I expected at least one congratulations. Nothing. An hour later, I checked again. Still nothing. I figured everyone was busy, so I waited. That evening I sent another message, just in case the first one got buried. Again, nothing. Friday passed. Then Saturday. Then Sunday. Not one text. Not one phone call. At first I wondered if something had happened. Then I saw Brandon's social media post. He was at a family barbecue with Natalie. The kids were running around, and everyone looked happy. That was when it hit me. They weren't busy. They were ignoring me. Being left out wasn't new. I'd missed plenty of family dinners and birthdays before because nobody bothered to tell me. But this felt different. I wasn't asking for much. I just wanted someone to say, "Good job, Ethan." On Monday, after work, I came home to a house that suddenly felt a lot emptier. Then my phone buzzed. For a second, I hoped it was my mom apologizing for the silence. Instead, it was Brandon. His message was short. "You think you're better than us now?" That was the moment something inside me changed. I stared at that message for a long time. It felt like every little insult, every passive-aggressive comment I dealt with growing up, had suddenly come rushing back. I wasn't angry yet. Mostly I felt hurt, confused, and strangely empty. After a while, I finally replied, "What do you mean?" "Nothing." I opened the family group chat and noticed that Brandon had finally read my message. So had Mom and Natalie. Still, nobody said a word. I sat alone on my new couch in the silence of my new house, trying to understand how inviting my family over had somehow turned into an accusation. I couldn't figure out why sharing something I was proud of had bothered my brother so much. At the time, I had no idea that text was only the beginning. The silence was just the first punch. What came after would slowly destroy whatever connection I still had with my family. Eventually, I'd reach a point where walking away from them became my only choice. But I wasn't there yet. First, I was about to find out how far they were willing to take it. I didn't answer Brandon right away. It wasn't because I had nothing to say. It was because I had too much to say. Old memories, frustrations, and disappointments kept flooding my mind. I read his message over and over. You think you're better than us now. There was no explanation. Nothing else. For a while, I tried convincing myself he was joking. Maybe it was just bad sarcasm. I waited a few hours, expecting another message saying he was kidding. Nothing came. So I did what I usually did. I stayed calm. I texted him again. I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. I just wanted to share something I worked really hard for. That's all. He read it. He never replied. The rest of that week, I didn't hear from anyone in my family. Not Mom. Not Natalie. Not even Dad, who rarely texted, but usually at least reacted with a thumbs up whenever something good happened. Instead, I watched them posting online like everything was normal. They shared family pictures, tagged each other in memes, and posted clips from movies we all used to watch together. At first, I tried telling myself it wasn't about me. Deep down, I knew it was. This wasn't new. It was just more obvious than ever. Every time something good happened in my life, they seemed to pull away. It was almost like they saw my success as a personal attack. When I earned a scholarship in high school, Mom barely looked up from her phone. When I got accepted into the honors program at college, Brandon shrugged and said, "Cool. Guess you'll just be smart and broke." When I graduated early, Natalie rolled her eyes and muttered, "Some people have way too much free time." This was no different. The only difference now was that I owned a house, something real that showed how far I'd come, and they couldn't stand it. The breaking point didn't happen overnight. It came one small disappointment at a time. The following week, I found out Natalie had thrown a birthday party for her boyfriend at my favorite restaurant, the same place where I'd taken her for her 20th birthday after her breakup. I only found out because one of her friends posted pictures online. Everyone was there. Brandon, Mom, even Dad, who almost never went anywhere unless it was a family event. Everyone except me. I stared at those pictures longer than I should have. They were smiling, laughing, raising their glasses together. There was an empty space where I should have been. That's when I realized this wasn't silence anymore. They were leaving me out on purpose. I decided to call Mom. I told myself I just wanted an explanation, maybe even an apology. She answered on the third ring. "Ethan?" she said, sounding distracted. "Hey, Mom, can we talk?" She sighed. "I'm really busy right now, honey. It'll only take a minute." A long pause. "Fine." I took a breath. I saw the pictures from Natalie's birthday. Everyone looked like they had a good time. Another pause. "Yeah, it was nice. I wasn't invited." Her voice immediately changed. "Well, I figured you were too busy showing off your new house." That caught me completely off guard. Showing off? I invited all of you over. I cooked. I waited. Nobody even answered my message. She let out an annoyed sigh. "You don't have to rub it in everyone's face, Ethan." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Rub what in? I bought a house. I wanted my family to see it." "Not everyone has had the kind of luck you've had," she snapped. I sat there speechless. "Luck?" I finally said. "I worked for everything I have." "I'm not arguing with you," she replied, her voice getting louder. "Your brother's going through a hard time. Natalie's struggling too. Then you come along showing off your new house like it's some kind of trophy. What did you expect us to feel?" I swallowed hard. I swallowed hard. "I thought you'd be proud of me." There was a long silence. Then she said something that hit harder than anything else. "You've always thought you were better than us. Now you finally believe it." And she hung up. I just sat there on the floor, staring at my phone. The fireplace I dreamed about since I was a kid quietly crackled beside me. But for the first time, my house didn't feel warm. It felt empty. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying our conversation. The way she called it luck, like none of my hard work mattered. The way she somehow made me feel guilty for succeeding. A few days later, things got even worse. When I came home from work, I found a folded piece of notebook paper tucked under my front door. There was no envelope and no name. The handwriting immediately looked familiar. It was from my 10-year-old niece, Sophie, Brandon's daughter. It said, "Uncle Ethan, why don't you want to see us anymore? Mommy said you're being selfish and mean. I miss you." Did I do something wrong? I just stood there staring at it. It wasn't Sophie's words that broke me. She was only a kid. It was knowing someone had put those ideas in her head. Selfish. Mean. That's what they were calling me. I hadn't even seen Sophie since Christmas, yet they were already turning her against me. I called Natalie immediately. She didn't answer. It went straight to voicemail. So I sent her a text. "Don't drag Sophie into this. Whatever's going on is between us. She doesn't deserve to be part of it." About 10 minutes later, she replied. I only told her the truth. I felt sick, not just angry, betrayed. This had stopped being about missed invitations or family dinners. They were rewriting the story, making me the selfish, arrogant one simply because I'd managed to build a life for myself. After that, I stopped trying. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't reach out anymore. If they wanted me to be the bad guy, I wasn't going to keep begging them to change their minds. Then Brandon crossed another line. It was Saturday morning, and I was organizing boxes in the garage when I heard a truck pull into my driveway. I looked through the window. It was Brandon. Before I could decide whether to answer the door, he started pounding on it. I opened it just enough to look outside. "What do you want?" Instead of answering, he pushed past me and walked inside. He slowly looked around the house. "Nice place," he said. "Must be nice not having any real responsibilities." I frowned. "Excuse me?" "No kids. Nobody depending on you. You just sit here in your perfect little house while the rest of us struggle." "I invited all of you over," I reminded him. "You ignored me." He turned toward me. "Because we're tired of your pity party." I couldn't help laughing. "Pity party? I invited my family to celebrate with me." He shook his head. "No. You invited us so you could show off. You've always acted like you're better than everyone else just because you didn't mess your life up." I'd had enough. "You're mad because I didn't fail, Brandon. That's not my fault." He stared at me, his jaw tight. "You think you're untouchable now," he said. "Just wait." Then he stormed out. I locked the door behind him. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. 2 days later, I realized just how serious things had become. My mortgage lender called me. "Hello, Mr. Jameson. Someone claiming to be your brother contacted us asking for information about your mortgage. He said it was related to a family emergency. We didn't give him any information, but we thought you should know." My stomach dropped. Brandon had actually tried to get access to my financial information. That's when everything finally made sense. This wasn't just jealousy anymore. It wasn't about hurt feelings or sibling rivalry. It was about control. My family couldn't accept that I'd built a life they had no control over, and they weren't finished trying to pull me back. From that day on, I started locking every door and checking them twice before going to bed. Not because I thought Brandon was going to break into my house. I honestly didn't think he'd go that far. But something inside me had changed. The door I'd kept open for my family all those years, the hope that one day they'd accept me, be proud of me, and finally see me for who I was, had finally closed. Brandon pretending to be me so he could get information about my mortgage wasn't just inappropriate. It was invasive. It was deliberate. And it confirmed what I'd been trying to ignore for years. My family wasn't upset because I had succeeded. They were upset because I had succeeded without them. I finally realized something I'd been refusing to admit for years. I was never really part of that family. Not emotionally, not mentally, not in any way that truly mattered. They accepted me as long as I stayed quiet and didn't outgrow the role they'd given me. The moment I accomplished something, I became a problem. After the call from my mortgage company, I just thanked them, confirmed I hadn't authorized anyone to access my account, and hung up. Then I sat on the edge of my bed as the evening sun came through the blinds. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I just felt exhausted. Exhausted from always trying to keep the peace. Exhausted from making myself smaller so nobody would accuse me of thinking I was better than them. Exhausted from being the only one reaching out. That night, I made a decision. I blocked Brandon, then Natalie, then Mom. I didn't bother blocking Dad. He hardly ever used his phone, and we hadn't spoken in months anyway. I didn't send some dramatic message saying I was cutting everyone off. I simply disappeared. For once, I gave them the same silence they'd given me. The next few weeks were harder than I expected. Even though it was my choice, it still felt like I was grieving. These were the people I'd grown up with. We'd celebrated birthdays together, spent holidays together, shared family jokes that suddenly felt like they belonged to another life. Sometimes I'd see a funny meme and instinctively think about sending it to Natalie. Sometimes I'd crave Mom's chili and almost text her for the recipe. Then I'd remember Brandon trying to access my financial records. I'd remember Mom calling my success luck. I'd remember Natalie using her own daughter to make me feel guilty. And the feeling would disappear. I felt alone. More than that. I felt like I'd been erased. But there's something about hitting rock bottom. At least it's solid ground. After spending a few weeks sitting with that emptiness, something inside me slowly started changing. It wasn't one big moment. It started with small things. I repainted the spare bedroom and turned it into a home office. I'd been putting it off for months, always telling myself I'd do it once family drama settled down. The truth was, things were never calm with my family. Now they were gone. For the first time, I had peace. I also started waking up earlier. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. I'd make myself a cup of coffee, pull on a hoodie, sit out on my small patio, and watch the sunrise. It became my favorite part of the day, my own little reminder that life could actually be peaceful. I also threw myself into work. I'd always done freelance web development and digital marketing on the side, but now I treated it like a real business. I updated my portfolio, reached out to new clients, and started accepting bigger, better-paying projects. One of those jobs changed everything. I built an online store for a small clothing brand. The website took off. Sales exploded, and the owner, Madison, told everyone my redesign had dramatically increased their conversions. Within 2 weeks, she referred me to 3 more businesses. Just like that, my schedule was full for months. With the extra money coming in, I finally started making my house feel like home. I bought a real couch, hung framed artwork on the walls, built a custom bookshelf with my own hands, replaced the old kitchen light fixtures with modern ones. Every little improvement reminded me that I didn't need anyone else's approval anymore. I was building this life for me. About 3 months after I cut contact, something happened that reminded me my family wasn't completely finished with me. One afternoon, I checked the mailbox and found a handwritten envelope. No return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Mom. I stood in my kitchen holding that letter for several minutes before opening it. That night, I finally unfolded it. It was only 1 page. Ethan, I don't know what's gotten into you. We haven't heard from you in weeks. I know you've always been sensitive, but this seems like a big reaction over a few misunderstandings. Your brother is having a difficult time. Your sister misses you, even if she doesn't know how to say it. I miss you too. I hope you'll put all this behind you soon. We're family, and that should count for something. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. Not once did she mention Brandon trying to get information about my mortgage. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she ask how I was doing. It was the same pattern I'd seen my entire life. Ignore what happened. Make excuses. Tell me to move on. I didn't answer. I folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer. Not because I wanted to keep it, because I never wanted to forget exactly why I walked away. I kept that letter as a reminder that I hadn't imagined any of it. Even after I walked away as quietly as possible, they still found a way to make themselves the victims. From that point on, I stopped focusing on what I'd lost and started focusing on rebuilding my life. One of the first things I did was start therapy. I'd thought about it for years, but never actually made the appointment. After meeting with a few therapists, I found one I really connected with. His name was Connor. During our very first session, he said something that stuck with me. He told me I'd been parenting myself since I was a kid. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn love that should have been given freely. I didn't know how to value myself unless someone else approved of me. That realization hit me hard. We spent weeks talking about boundaries, guilt, and the difference between being lonely and being at peace. Little by little, I started feeling lighter, more confident, more like myself. I also started journaling again, something I hadn't done since high school. I filled page after page with thoughts, questions, and small victories. The month I made my first $10,000 freelancing. The week I realized I hadn't thought about Mom's approval once. The day I walked through my living room, smiled to myself, and felt genuinely proud. Not the kind of pride that hopes someone notices, just quiet pride. I also started building a life outside my family. I reconnected with an old college friend after he moved back into town. I met new people through local tech meetups. I even started going to a monthly board game night at a cafe near my house. Nothing happened overnight. But the friendships were real. No drama. No expectations. One evening, I hosted game night at my place. As I looked around my living room, 5 friends were laughing, talking, and drinking cider together. For the first time in years, I felt chosen. None of them cared about my family drama. They didn't know the old version of me who constantly tried to keep everyone happy. They simply liked me for who I was. That feeling healed something inside me. About 5 months after I cut contact with my family, everything changed again. One morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. The message came from a number I didn't recognize. It was Natalie. "Don't freak out. I'm not trying to fight. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen. I hadn't heard from her in almost 6 months. Not since the message Sophie had written after Natalie convinced her I was selfish and mean. For a moment, I almost deleted the text. Instead, I replied, "About what?" Her answer came almost immediately. "It's about Brandon." Just like that. The past found me again. I didn't respond right away. Not because I wasn't curious, I was. But I'd spent months rebuilding my life. I wasn't the quiet little brother anymore. I wasn't the guy who blamed himself for everyone else's problems. And I definitely wasn't going to beg for my family's approval ever again. It's about Brandon. Those words stayed in my head all day. I tried working. I couldn't focus. I went for a run. It didn't help. Later, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, wondering why she was reaching out now. The last time we'd spoken, she'd defended telling her own daughter I was selfish. So why now? Part of me wanted to ignore her. Another part couldn't stop wondering what had happened. Finally, that afternoon, I texted back, "You've got 10 minutes. I'm not doing family therapy over text." She answered within seconds. "Can I come over? I just want to talk." I hesitated. Letting her back into my house, the same house she'd mocked from the beginning, didn't feel right. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I knew how to set boundaries. So I replied, "1 hour. No drama. No games. You say what you came to say, then you leave." She sent back a thumbs up. When she arrived later that day, I barely recognized her. She looked exhausted. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, and the dark circles under her eyes made it look like she hadn't slept in days. I opened the door, but didn't invite her inside immediately. "Are you alone?" I asked. She nodded. "Yeah, just me." I stepped aside and she quietly walked in. She looked around the house for a moment before following me to the kitchen. We sat at the island. I stayed on my feet. After a long silence, she looked up at me. "You look good." I didn't react. Get to the point. I didn't feel responsible anymore. For the first time in my life, their problems weren't mine to fix. Natalie let out a slow breath and started pulling at the sleeve of her hoodie. Brandon's in trouble. I crossed my arms. What kind of trouble? She hesitated before answering. He lost his job again, and he's been gambling. I raised an eyebrow. Gambling? She nodded. It started with crypto and NFTs. Then he got completely hooked on sports betting. It's bad, Ethan. They're 3 months behind on the mortgage, and they already lost the car. I looked at her for a second. What does that have to do with me? She swallowed. He used your name. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? She took a deep breath. He opened a line of credit using your name and your social security number. He said he still had your information from when you filed taxes together years ago. For a moment, I couldn't even process what she'd said. She quickly added, I didn't know until yesterday. I swear. I told him he was out of his mind. I forced myself to stay calm. How much? She looked down. $10,000. He maxed it out. The statements were mailed to his house, but they were in your name. I turned away from the kitchen island and tried to steady my breathing. $10,000. My name. My credit. I hadn't spoken to Brandon in months, and somehow he'd still found a way to blow up my life. I turned back. Why are you telling me this now? She hesitated. Because he said he's going to try to borrow against your house next. That stopped me cold. What? He was bragging about it, she said quietly. He kept saying you were too busy playing homeowner to notice. He said if you weren't willing to share what you had, he'd just take what he deserved. I stared at her. What he deserved? I repeated. She nodded. He honestly believes you cheated your way into all of this. I felt my temper flare. I worked, I snapped. I saved, I sacrificed. Every single thing I own, I earned. I know, she said softly. That's why I'm here. I thought you should know before he went any further. I slowly sat back down, trying to think. $10,000 in my name. A possible attempt to go after my house. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was identity theft. Fraud. A crime. After a long silence, I finally looked at her. Why now, Natalie? Why not 3 months ago? Why not when Sophie wrote me that note? She couldn't meet my eyes. Because I was angry. I really believed you'd abandoned us. Mom kept saying you were punishing the family, and I believed her. She paused. Now I see who Brandon really is, and I'm scared. For Sophie. For myself. I didn't answer. I was too busy thinking. Finally, I stood up. Thanks for telling me, but you need to go. She nodded. As she reached the door, she turned back. Are you going to press charges? I didn't answer, because I honestly didn't know yet. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was upset, because for the first time, I had a plan. Not something emotional. Not some loud confrontation. A quiet plan. A careful one. I pulled out every financial document I had. Old tax returns, bank records, credit reports. I changed every password. I froze my credit. Filed an identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission. Placed fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus. The next morning, I met with a lawyer I'd worked with before through one of my freelance clients. After hearing everything, she leaned back and said, if we can prove all of this, he's done. Good. That was exactly what I wanted, but I wasn't interested in blowing everything up overnight. I wanted to do it right. So I stayed quiet. I gathered evidence, requested full copies of my credit reports, compared every account, found the fraudulent credit line, tracked when it had been opened, matched the address, saved every document. My lawyer helped me file a police report, not to have Brandon arrested immediately, but to create an official record. Then I made one more phone call. I called Madison, the same woman whose business had taken off after I built her website. Still looking for investors? I asked. She laughed. Always. The truth was, I'd saved more money than anyone in my family knew. I'd lived below my means, paid off my debts, kept saving. Now I was finally ready to build something bigger. Madison was in. Over the next 2 months, We quietly started a small marketing agency focused on digital strategy for niche brands. I brought the money, she brought the clients, we both brought the experience. We kept everything low-key, no announcements, no attention, just steady work. During all that time, I didn't contact my family once, not even after hearing through mutual friends that Brandon was falling apart. Creditors kept calling. His wife had taken the kids and left for a while. Mom was worried sick. I heard all of it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't try to save him. I didn't flinch. Because I knew something they didn't. Their silence didn't make them stronger. It made them predictable. And now the next move was mine. I'd spent my whole life trying to be heard. Now I didn't have to say a word. The last domino fell on a Thursday. It had been exactly 92 days since Natalie showed up at my door, hands shaking, telling me Brandon had stolen my identity and put $10,000 of debt in my name. 92 days of quiet preparation, carefully gathering evidence, documenting everything, working with my lawyer, building a case strong enough that Brandon couldn't talk his way out of it this time. By then, the marketing company Madison and I started was officially running. We'd signed 3 major clients, hired 2 part-time freelancers, and rented a small office downtown. It wasn't anything flashy, but it made us look far more established than we were. I didn't brag about it. I didn't post about it online. I just kept working. Because revenge isn't about making noise. It's about timing. The morning everything finally happened, I was sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee. The same kitchen where Natalie had warned me months earlier. When the knock came, I didn't even flinch. Everything had already been set in motion. Weeks before, I'd reported the identity theft. I froze my credit, filed reports, submitted sworn statements, and handed my lawyer every piece of evidence I'd collected. Copies of the fraudulent application, credit reports, bank records, the statement from my mortgage lender, even screenshots of Natalie admitting what Brandon had done. My lawyer actually laughed once and said, "Most people don't come in this prepared." I didn't. This wasn't something I wanted to leave to chance. As the investigation moved forward, they found even more. Brandon hadn't stopped after opening 1 account. He'd tried opening 2 more using my information, but the fraud alerts I placed on my credit stopped both attempts. The applications traced back to his address, his phone number, his internet connection. Everything pointed straight at him. At first, the case wasn't considered a priority. Then I handed over the complete file. That changed everything. Brandon was arrested for identity theft, wire fraud, and attempted grand larceny. 3 felony charges. His bail was set at $50,000. He couldn't afford it. Strangely enough, that wasn't the part that stayed with me. About a week later, Rachel called, Brandon's wife. She asked if we could meet for coffee. When I got there, she looked exhausted. Her hair was tied back, and she had a folder tucked under her arm. Before I even sat down, she said, "I'm divorcing him." I nodded. "I'm not here to change your mind." She gave a tired smile. "I didn't think you were." Then she slid the folder across the table. "I wanted you to have this." Inside were screenshots of text messages. Brandon bragging about his plans, making fun of me, laughing with one of his friends that he could probably squeeze another $20,000 out of his idiot brother before I noticed. I didn't react. I just nodded. "Thank you." She looked at me for a moment. "You're not the only person he hurt," she said quietly. "You're just the only one who finally did something about it." She stood up to leave. Then she turned back. "Sophie still talks about you." I looked up. "She still has the drawing you made for her hanging next to her bed." That almost broke me, but I held myself together. I simply nodded. "She's a good kid." Rachel hesitated. Then she smiled sadly. "If you ever want to see her again, you'd be welcome. I think she needs more people like you in her life." That night, I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel like I'd won. It wasn't that kind of revenge. What I felt was peace. Everything after that happened slowly. Natalie reached out one more time. This time she apologized. A real apology. No excuses. No blaming anyone else. She told me she'd started therapy and was finally beginning to understand how unhealthy our family had always been. I wished her well, and that was all. I wasn't interested in rebuilding what we'd had, but I also wasn't carrying any hatred anymore. Mom stayed silent for several weeks. Then, one Sunday morning, an email showed up in my inbox. Not a phone call, not a text, an email. It read, "Ethan, I don't know what to say anymore. I feel like I don't even know you. I never thought our family would end up like this. But maybe it was already broken, and we just refused to see it." Mom's email ended with, "I hope you're happy. I hope this is what you wanted. I still love you, even if I don't understand you. Mom." I read it twice. There was still no apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just sadness mixed with the same quiet suggestion that somehow I was responsible for everything. I didn't answer. I was done explaining myself to people who had never wanted to understand me. A few weeks later, Brandon accepted a plea deal. He avoided prison, but only barely. He received probation, community service, a heavy financial penalty, and a felony on his record that would follow him for the rest of his life. From then on, every time he applied for credit or tried to open a financial account, he'd be under extra scrutiny. His credit was destroyed. His marriage was over. Finding another good job wasn't going to be easy. I didn't celebrate. But I won't pretend I didn't feel some sense of justice. After that, I let my lawyer handle everything else. Through restitution, we recovered part of the money Brandon had stolen. Not all of it, but enough. The fraudulent accounts were removed from my credit history, my reports were cleared, and my identity was finally protected again. As for me, I kept moving forward. The business Madison and I started grew faster than either of us expected. We signed more clients, hired a virtual assistant, and eventually moved into a slightly larger office. My house finally became what I'd always wanted it to be, a home. It no longer reminded me of family arguments or betrayal. Every room felt peaceful again. I bought a better couch, hung real artwork on the walls, and before long, I started hosting board game nights again. One afternoon, Natalie asked if Sophie could come see my house. Just Sophie. She drove her over on a Saturday and waited outside while I showed my niece around. Sophie was fascinated. She pointed at everything. "Is this your kitchen? Is that your backyard? Did you really build this?" Her excitement made me smile. When it was time for her to leave, she hugged me tightly. Then she whispered, "You're like a superhero." I laughed. "Why do you think that?" She smiled. "Because you stopped the bad guy." I didn't correct her. After they left, I stood on my front porch for a long time, watching the sun disappear behind the rooftops. For the first time in years, I felt complete. Not because I'd beaten anyone, not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I finally stopped making myself smaller just to keep other people comfortable. I stopped chasing love from people who only knew how to compete with me. I finally understood that peace isn't always something you're given. Sometimes, you have to choose it for yourself. The house is still standing, and so am I.